Welcome to PS Garage. I'm Steve. Brenda, did you know that this weekend is the second time we're taking the BMW out to a race event?
That's right, Steve. This is the second autocross ever for the BMW, except instead of me, it's gonna be my mom behind the wheel. For folks at home, if you don't remember what that's like, make sure you check out our rallycross video in Yanceyville.
The water pumps on these M52 BMW engines are notorious for failing because they have a plastic impeller that breaks apart under normal use and clogs up the system, and that's really bad on the road, and it's even worse on the track. So this is a job that we've been putting off for a little while that we're finally going to get around to doing because we really shouldn't put it off anymore.
Yeah, the forum posts about water systems grenading finally motivated us. Unfortunately, folks have been making metal impeller water pumps to solve just this problem. And so we're gonna pop this sucker in there along with a new fan.
That's right. This BMW has been in a front-end collision before, and the fan is all wobbly and actually is missing one of the fins, and it's a big mess, and it's also about time that we fix that up.
Steve, are you ready to get coolant all over your garage floor?
It's my favorite thing to get coolant all over my garage floor, Brenda.
Let's get to work.
Hey, you want to bet that we take it apart and it's already replaced with a metal one?
I bet you're right.
Over here on the workbench, we have the parts and the special tools that we're gonna use to replace the parts in today's job. So, first up, we have the fan, and our current fan is missing one of these fins, so we're going to go ahead and replace that. It came as part of the kit. Attaching to the fan is the fan clutch. So this is a thermostatic clutch, which means that as it heats up, it actually builds resistance and actually spins faster and faster. So when it's at room temperature or ambient temperature, it really doesn't spin much at all, and that reduces the parasitic load of the cooling fan on the engine, increasing the efficiency a bit. Then, when everything gets nice and hot, it actually locks up and spins at the speed of the engine. So this is a belt-driven system. Fans these days tend to be electric. This is a little bit more old school. Sometimes you see it still on trucks and stuff like that. So here we have the pièce de résistance, the water pump. And this water pump is one that has the metal impeller here. And this impeller is the part that on the original equipment was made of a resin or a plastic that really didn't hold up very well over time, and that would crack and disintegrate and grenade. So people are making replacements. There are higher quality plastic ones, and there are also metal ones. There's some debate over what's more necessary or what works better, but we think this one's gonna be just fine for what we're doing. And then finally, we picked up some special tools for actually cracking the nut on the clutch from the water pump. And these are supposed to really help you get into that tight space and do the job a little bit easier. So with that, we're going to start taking things apart so we can drain the coolant, and hopefully everything goes well. First step in this process is getting as much of the old coolant out of the system as we can, so that when we are actually working on the water pump, we don't have a system that's completely full of coolant. So there is a bleeder valve that's back here, and we're going to go ahead and loosen that. That's step one. Next, I'm going to pull the drain plug on the radiator, which is on the lower driver's hand side, right over here. So let's get our drip pan in the right position, and then we're going to go ahead and pull that. So once that's finished draining, we're just gonna go ahead and reinstall our drain plug, and then we'll move on to the next step.
All right, next comes the very messy part. We have to get the coolant out of the engine block itself, and there is pretty much no clean way to do this. I have cardboard down to try to catch some of it. There's a bucket down there, and I have this funnel out of sheer arrogance, in defiance of how I know this is going to go. So it's going to be a, what is this? Oh, thanks. It's gonna be a 6mm Allen thingy on the side of the engine block on the passenger side. So let's get messy. Whee!
So that drain plug is positioned on the side of the engine block, kind of just behind the sway bar, by the catalytic converter, above the steering rack.
You know, where it makes the most mess. Just because I have shrimpy arms. And this helps. God. Oh my God.
German engineering at its finest.
Yeah, they really thought that one out. All right, as you saw, things are gonna come out under pressure and go flying. I found the drain plug down at the back of the car, and there's also this little crush washer that you don't wanna lose, or you can potentially get a slow coolant leak out of the side of your engine block. So keep an eye out for that, and your drain plug, maybe set up some kind of better catching system than I had.
Now that we've made the mess and gotten most of the coolant out of the system, we can come up to the top of the engine and start working on things from this end. So the first thing that we have to do is to remove the fan shroud so that we can get at the fan. So there are 2 rivets with the 6-cylinder engine, one on this side and one on this side. We're going to try to remove them without destroying them so much that they can't be reused, which is probably easier said than done. On our model, we do not have an auxiliary fan in the front. If you were to look over here and you see a big honking electric fan, you're going to want to unplug your battery before you proceed to do any of this part, because if that turns on while you're working, you can get really hurt. So definitely don't do that. Disconnect the battery if you have an auxiliary fan. So let's get to work on these rivets. On this one I cheated and I already got it most of the way out. We're going to pull the pin, put it in our pocket where it'll get lost. Then gotta work on pulling the rest of it out. So there's one. And I cheated with the other one already too. Oh. Might have just broken it a little bit. Oh, it's definitely a little broken. Ah, there we go. So with the fan shroud all kind of loosey-goosey on here, we can't actually take it out yet until we also get the fan loose itself. So for that, we have our special tools, and you have to come over here to the fan pulley, which is in here attached to the fan, and kind of get it to rotate around until you can get some grip on it. There's 4 bolts on that pulley, and you're gonna align those with these slots, and then hold that while you turn the wrench counterclockwise to break it free. The problem is there's not a lot of clearance in here, so we're actually going to go underneath the car to set the pulley holder, and then someone from the top is going to come in and wrench on that. Hopefully it breaks free nice and easy, and we can get the fan out of there and then start working on the pulley itself.
Did it do
That's a
it?
good thing I was wearing gloves.
It's on top, and oh, it's totally broken free.
Awesome. So now we've got the fan loose. Pull it all out from the top, shroud and the fan. All at the same time, maybe. We're caught up on some hoses. And there we go. We're gonna keep that shroud that I just threw on the ground. But our fan is kind of all messed up, so we are missing one of the fins here, and then no, that looks pretty true. I mean, we got to figure out why this was wobbling so much. I thought it was because the fan was sitting improperly on the clutch. Maybe it's a clutch bearing. I hope it's not something with the water pump shaft itself. But we're replacing all of that, and hopefully after we do, everything spins nice and true and not all wobbly and bad. Doing a little bit of benchtop diagnostics here. We put the fan in the vise because I kind of want to know what part was making it wobble. So if we come down in line with the fan and we give it a spin. We gotta spin it a few times because we're gonna, get that clutch nice and warm. We can see that it is indeed the fan itself that's wobbly. So that's a good sign. That means that there's probably no problem with the water pump or any of that being out of whack.
Next thing we want to do before we pull off, well, all the pulley belts and the pulleys themselves is we want to get these M10 bolts started. And these are very easy for me to do. So maybe that's because somebody's done this already and just left them kind of finger tight. Or maybe that's how yours will come. I don't know. Okay, our next step is to take our little screwdriver here and pop this plastic dust cover off of the belt tensioner. Easy. And then we've got a Torx bolt in there, which we actually didn't know was there. We happen to have Torx bits, but if you don't, go get them. And once we take off that tensioner, we're gonna be able to remove the belt and get at our pulley. Tug, and that makes looseness, and then you get the belt right off. A+ to 2000's BMW when they came up with that design. That's way easier than the Civic to get the belts off. But now that that belt is off, we are going to take these M10 bolts out the rest of the way and remove the pulley, which sits over our water pump, our eventual prize. Remember, I loosened these already. If you try to loosen these with the belt off, you're just gonna spin the pulley and have a bad time. Pry bar. With that pulley off, we can see our water pump. It's old and rusty, and we've got more M10 bolts that have to come off, and there's potential for more mess here, so I have my catch pan underneath. Save Steve's garage floor a little bit. Water pump. Okay, so they're actually studs. I was expecting bolts, but they were nuts that came off, and I got 2 in the bucket and 2 in my hand. So 2 I'm gonna have to go fishing for. So now I've got these 2 long M6 bolts that are gonna go in on the left and right of the water pump. And as we screw those in, it's going to push the water pump out and break that seal.
Interesting stuff. What's that you got there?
That is a water pump with a metal impeller on it.
I won the bet.
You did win the bet. So this maintenance has been done. When asked, the seller, previous owner, told us that it hadn't been, but that's good. I mean, that means while we were driving it hard at the last autocross, there wasn't a chance of this thing exploding on us. So I guess what are we getting out of the deal? A fixed fan. That explains why all of these bolts and nuts were all so easy to take out, is because, well, this had already been done before and they didn't really wrench them down super hard.
Okay, so now we've got all of the parts out that we needed to get out. We were a little bit surprised to find a metal impeller on the water pump that we removed from the car. So that means we probably didn't have to do this, but on the plus side, we do have that new fan that's going in that's gonna have all of its blades and not be so wobbly. So, I mean, it's necessary work, something that we would have had to do to replace the fan anyway. Might as well do the water pump. So the first thing that we're gonna do with the new water pump is fit this O-ring to it, and then we're gonna just slot this right back in, and then we're going to go ahead and we're gonna prep that new fan with the new clutch to go back on the car. O-ring's on, let's throw it back in. These do have a set orientation. You wanna make sure that all of your 6 holes line up with the flange on the engine. In this case, we have these 2 that are close to each other up here, and then 2 that are close to each other down there. And we're just gonna take this and slot it back in. That new O-ring can be a little bit stiff, Really just have to get it in there far enough for the studs to catch so that you can thread it on. So once I get a couple studs started, I just use the nuts on the studs to kind of walk it back in there. That's easier than pushing it in with brute force to get over that O-ring. The new water pump is in place, and so the next step is going to be to put that pulley back on, finger tighten it, and then we're going to put the belt on, and then get the new fan ready for the install. Now the belt's going back on. Easier said than done. Seems pretty good. Now we're gonna put the new clutch and fan together and make sure that the orientation is correct here. In this case, the side with the ribs is the side that faces into the engine. So it's just gonna line up right like that, and we're gonna get it bolted together. With the belt back in place, we're gonna snug up those pulley bolts and then get the fan ready to go in. Now is the big juggling act of putting the fan and the fan shroud kind of back in together at the same time, because that's how they came out. There are some tabs for the shroud on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, so you want to make sure that when you slide the shroud back down, you get those tabs lined up. I'll hold this. Can you get the fan started? It's where it pays to have a friend. I think it's going. Yeah, that's it.
Cool.
Now we have to use those tools again to tighten that down. All right, don't hurt your hand. You good?
I think. Whoop, popped off.
Fan's all installed, fan shroud is in place, so don't forget to put in your little rivets, and then we're just going to fill it up with coolant and we'll be ready to go. All set.
It's all finally put back together. And so the last step is filling it back up with coolant, and we have coolant that's compatible with all BMWs, this says. The important thing for these engines with the European systems are designed for coolant that doesn't have phosphates and stuff in it. So it's worth getting the right coolant, because then it doesn't leave deposits in your engine, which can hurt it later on. In this, we have a fun little gauge that tells us when it's full. Capacity for this car is 10.5 liters. Worth mentioning that you fill this car up from the overflow reservoir. Some cars have a little port that you use to fill up the radiator. This is actually a little bit more convenient. I like this. 1 of 3. Don't forget to put your bleeder plug back in. So I poured in a bunch of coolant, and our coolant fullness indicator is indicating full, but it's a false full because we haven't bled the engine yet. Air can get trapped in when you do anything related to coolant, and that prevents it from properly cooling the car. So what we're gonna actually have to do is go into the car. We're going to have to put the key into accessory mode. Don't turn the engine on. Change the heat controls to maximum hot and the fan control to minimum fan. Okay? So now we're done in here. And then what we have to do is go back. That's empty. To our overflow reservoir, and we pour in coolant, watching the coolant come through the drainage plug, the bleeder plug right here, and we're watching for it to have no more bubbles. See all those bubbles? That would be in our cooling system. It stopped bubbling, which means we move on to the next step. And the next step is just to start the engine and let it idle and come up to operating temperature. And that's it.
So there we go with a very unnecessary job of the water pump change in this 2000 BMW Z3 2.3 with the M52 engine.
That's right, and that means it's ready for autocrossing on Sunday. Very exciting. We did it.
Yeah, it'll be a good time.
Yeah.
So join us for that. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, follow along while we do our autocross and our rallycross and our track days and messing around with jobs that we don't have to do. I think this is the second one.
The second
Ended up being-
unnecessary
yeah.
maintenance. The timing belt on the Civic was also completely unnecessary.
That's
Watch
right.
that video. It's long. Steve put in a lot of work.
That's real long. It's two or three parts.
Right.
I don't know. All right, let's go to bed.
Okay.
All right, bye.
See you next time.